Thank you very much for Emerge ME for this opportunity to present here, and I feel a huge responsibility, particularly because of Alan, that said that being the last presentation, I'm the dessert of this day, so I think that it's quite something. But at least I promise that I'm not talking about hard science. I think that you have a full day and full 2 days, and what I'm talking about here is a strategy that we try to establish with this EUROMENE, that stands for European Network on ME. And we established this network, we tried to establish this network a few years ago, and it was finally funded by the COST, which is one of the European agencies for establishing networks or for funding networks. And the main contextual challenge that we had in Europe, and I think that around the world as well, it's that the ME research there is a lack of collaborative approach. I think that this is improving nowadays, but when we started, it was mostly some idols of excellence trying to do some research. Research and health services were concentrated on these few centers, and it was quite fragmented, and it still is. So we have this idea that to tackle the problems and the challenges put to us in this complex disease, we have to work in a collaborative way and bringing into this collaborative as much expertise as possible, including scientists community, the patient community, the healthcare communities, industry, and other players. So I think that I passed this because it's well known, the unknown etiology, clinical variability that we have, the lack of validated biomarkers, although we have some progress in this way that you have seen through these 2 days. The limited treatment options, so we have some management of symptoms, but not what we call treatment, and the high associated socioeconomic burden. So the aim of this network was to establish this sustainable network of researchers, and we have as the objectives to collect population-based data on ME/CFS, basically to have a kind of snapshot of what is going on in Europe, establish a synchronized European database, assess potential biomarkers, and harmonize infrastructure efforts. And I think that this is quite important. For example, Luis yesterday talked about the biobank here, the ME/CFS biobank that we have established in the UK, and we try to synchronize our protocols with other biobanks, particularly in Norway and Italy, some in Spain, Norway, sorry, I already thought about Norway, Latvia, that has some biocollections, and then to assess these biomarkers, harmonizing these infrastructure researchers, and to assess the socioeconomic impact. So the strategy that we developed was to work in working groups. So we have 6 working groups, mainly epidemiology, biomarkers, socioeconomics, and clinical research and diagnostic criteria. Then we have one working group that was mainly to involve young researchers, and the 6th working group was for dissemination and patient involvement. So these working groups will be interacting to each other, and we have submitted this proposal with some working packages that have specific tasks to be delivered in the 4-year project. So we are now in the 3rd year, and we are getting to the final year in April this year. So we started the EUROMENE with 8 countries, and then this is a specific way that these agents fund research, these networks. And the main aim of these networks are to enable good proposals, research proposals, to be funded by the major funding agencies like the Horizon 2020. So the majority of the countries that I'm showing, sorry. These dark blues are the initial countries, and each European country has a cost representative. So to be part of the network, any researcher or entrepreneur or patient association could ask for the cost representative to be named. And this cost representative that has nothing to do with the proposal can name these people. So we end up with this, we started with these countries that are dark blue, and then throughout the progress of the network, of the proposal, we were joined by different countries. So now we have 22 countries, 21 European, and one that is called near neighbor country, which is Belarus. And these ones are called inclusive ITCs, inclusiveness target countries, that if you want to have some European grant, you have to include them because they are considered in a very good way. They are considered, sorry, I forgot the, I'm really sorry. I forgot the word here. So we need to include these countries to get a good chance of funding. So this is the distribution of the countries that we have. And one interesting thing is that mostly of the Central and Western European countries are where the main centers of excellence are, if we can call them that. But at least we have some researchers that are developing some good research on this area. And the majority of the Eastern European countries, they don't have recognition of the disease, and they don't have any service. So we have Latvia is the current grant holder of this European network. And we have countries like, in this area, for example, Bulgaria, we have 2 neurologists, and they try to identify patients, and they don't recognize them. So this is the situation now. We have the Belarus as the near neighbor country. They can join the action, but they cannot vote. So these are the current participants. Some of them never appear in our meetings, but we have 2 management committee meetings per year. We have at least 2 meetings for each working group, and the working groups are established, and we have at least 2 face-to-face meetings per year. It's important to say that in this grant, it's not a research grant. It's just for networking. So this means that the work we are trying to do is on our own terms. So people don't have any support in terms of granting for doing research. So where we are now. In terms of the epidemiology working group, we have published a paper showing the snapshot of what we have in terms of prevalence and incidence, and we are applying for a systematic review on the prevalence of ME/CFS in Europe. So there are particularly the studies that we have now are basically on the Western European countries. We have a working group on biomarker that Dr. Carmen Scheibenbogen is the working group leader, and there are some publications on the potential biomarkers, and we'll be doing some recommendations on that. We have a working group on socioeconomics, and the main outputs of this working group is the evaluation of socioeconomics on direct and indirect costs. And the idea is to have a consensus protocol for economic loss calculation in Europe. The fourth working group is the main idea is to get recommendation for diagnosis and stratification, management of symptoms, and therapeutics based on what we have now. Then, in terms of working group conferences, I think that we have some advancement, particularly including the ITC countries. So we have some summer schools, training schools, one in Pavia on omics technology. We have 15 early career investigators attending this course, mainly from ITC countries. And we have the summer school for translation research with 10 ITCs, early career investigations from ITCs. So the work in progress is mainly patient involvement that we have to bring into this, and I'm one of the, I think that most fierce advocate or bringing in patients, and I'm trying to do this, and we will have a final conference in Riga. So the idea is to, up to between February and March in 2020, we will have some summary of the working groups. And the main idea is to get some recommendations on the 4 main working groups, and to use this document to do advocacy on European MPs. So we have the names of the associations in European based on a survey of the participating countries. And let me go back here. The majority of the Eastern European countries participating don't have any associations yet. So what are the potential benefits for this? Firstly, is the increased awareness of the ME/CFS in the whole European, to establish a stronger research platform, to have standardized protocols, and the engagement of scientific community and health providers. So this is the last meeting that we had at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And that's it. It was not the dessert that you deserve, but I'm quite overwhelmed by this responsibility. Thank you. Yes.
Is there, in fact, a much lower incidence of ME/CFS in Eastern Europe?
Sorry?
Is there a much lower prevalence of ME/CFS in Eastern Europe?
I would love to respond to that, but I don't know. And particularly because it's not recognized. We have in one of the countries, which was in Serbia, we have one neurologist that told us, he joined in the first group of countries that joining, and he said that he have been diagnosing patients with ME/CFS, adolescents, and he's a neurologist pediatrician. The other participants from Romania, for example, we have 2 neurologists there, and we ask how many patients that you have diagnosed, none. So there isn't even a recognition of the condition. Although in Latvia, they have a cohort of patients with ME/CFS. So it's very patchy. And one thing that we are trying to do is to do these systematic reviews on what on the research that is published already. So we have the majority of the research for epidemiological research in our first cohort was based on UK studies. But there are some in Italy, Germany, Norway, but not in the Eastern European countries.
And so there are no patient organizations in those countries?
Not, as far as we know, no. But the fact that they are participating and they are sending early career investigators, meaning PhD students, to the summer schools, it's a way of raising awareness in these countries. And we believe that it's not that they don't have ME/CFS, they don't recognize it.
The patients would, wouldn't they?
Yes, they would. But I mean, in Latvia, for example, we have a subcohort of patients that are diagnosed as Lyme disease. So we guess that there are some, but you're welcome.